Welcome to this online lesson, and it's a lesson about what we scientists call control variables. Now, I know we've already talked about what we call independent and dependent variables, but today I want to talk to you about another sort of variable in an experiment. So let's look at an example here. We've always been talking about when we do an experiment that the thing a scientist changes each time they do an experiment. That's called the independent variable. And the thing a scientist measures each time they do an experiment is called the dependent variable. We said we remembered that by thinking of dairy milk ice cream. Dependent, you measure; independent, you change. So if I think of the experiment you thought of to do with the malachite fizzing yesterday, we said that the independent variable, the thing we were going to change in that experiment, was the different pieces of malachite. We'd use a different piece of malachite each time. And when we measured in our experiment, the dependent variable is going to be the time it fizzed for in the acid. But I need to think, would anything else have made a difference to how long that malachite fizzed for? For example, if I had used, let's have a think, a different type of acid, would it have fizzed for a different amount of time? What about if I'd used a different strength of acid? What if I'd used a different volume of acid? Or maybe I put a number of different scoops of malachite in. Now, all those things could have made a difference to my result, so I need to make sure I don't change any of them. The things that a scientist needs to keep the same in an experiment so that they don't affect the results, those are called the control variables. So the control variables in my malachite experiment would be things like the volume of acid. And I always need to use the same volume of acid in my malachite experiment. Or I always need to use the same strength of acid, or the same size of the piece of malachite, or the type of acid used. Because if I didn't keep that the same, I wouldn't know if it was the different piece of malachite that was fizzing for different times, or if it was because I'd used a different type of acid. So a scientist should only change one thing in an experiment, and anything else that could affect the results needs to be kept the same. And we call those control variables. So we need to think carefully about anything else that might make our results different. So here's another example. The height that a sunflower grows is affected by the amount of fertilizer added to the soil. Let's have a think of an experiment I could do about that. Well, if I wanted to check out that, I would change the amount of fertilizer added to the soil. That could be my independent variable. I would measure the height that the sunflower grows to. But what other things might make a difference to how tall the sunflower grows? Well, it might be the number of hours sunlight that the sunflower gets. So I need to make sure that every sunflower gets the same amount of sunlight. You might be able to think of some other things that would make the sunflower grow taller. I need to keep all those things the same, and those are my control variables. So anything else that could affect the height the sunflower grows to, I need to keep the same. So have a think of another example. If I was doing an experiment to see if the distance that a car needs to stop, if it's affected by the speed it's traveling at, I would do an experiment where I change the speed the car is traveling at. That would be my independent variable. I would measure the distance the car needs to stop. That would be my dependent variable. But I need to think of some things that I need to keep the same. What else might make a difference to the distance that a car needs to stop? Well, I might say the type of tires on the car. Or I might say the road that the car is driving on. I could put those in as control variables. So I need to think of all the things that I would keep the same in an experiment. Now you've got a job to do on the worksheet I've put with this lesson. Let's have a look at that worksheet. The worksheet is a Google slide, and it gives you space to think of different experiments and what the independent, dependent, and control variables would be. The independent variable, dairy milk ice cream, is the thing that we change. The dependent is the thing we measure, and the control variable is the thing that we need to keep the same because they might affect the results. So I want you to have a go at filling in all the boxes on both parts of the worksheet about what you think the independent, dependent, and control variables might be in those experiments. Good luck with the work. Look forward to seeing what you send me. Thanks now.